So the first topic we want to dive into will be the recap of the season, even though I think we all knew what was going to happen before it started.
Yeah, very predictable season this year. But Z, what were you kind of expecting going into the season that perhaps could have shook things up? We all knew Golden State and Cleveland were going to be inevitably leading the forefront of their playoff push, but was there anybody that you saw maybe challenging them this year?
So I didn't think anybody would really challenge them, and we knew what was going to happen. So I want to talk about something else. I really thought the Clippers would be better than they were.
Really? Okay.
You had Patrick Beverly, who I particularly don't like. I'm a Westbrook fan, so that kind of, you can put the connection there.
Yeah.
But they had a lot of guards. Even I thought Blake Griffin was really going to take off because I like Blake as a point forward, and he didn't really get to display his playmaking ability as much as he could with Chris Paul there. So once Chris Paul left, I felt like, giving him the reins and really letting him take over the offense, they would be better. And then they signed him to the career for, or signed him to the 5-year, and they're like, you know what, we don't want you anymore.
Yeah.
So that was a surprise to me. And then also, I really thought Giannis was going to take that leap this year.
Yeah, I think we've been waiting for that. I'd say even prior to this year, we were expecting maybe the 2016-2017 season to really be the point in which he takes, not only his personal game, but just the Milwaukee Bucks to the next level. That's really where I've been frustrated. I'm a Milwaukee Bucks fan, so to see them kind of fall stagnant has been disappointing.
What do you think about Jason Kidd as was their coach? Did you feel like he was helping Giannis, or was he kind of impeding the progress?
I don't know. I mean, it's tough to credit player development to coaches half of the time because you really don't understand if it's just a matter of circumstance. But I mean, for what Jason Kidd did with Giannis over those couple seasons, I thought was impressive. And he even seemed to be taking Milwaukee into a solid playoff run. But I don't know. I don't know if it had to do with what they were doing with their management. The team didn't seem to really come together cohesively.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they did succumb to some injuries as well. But
get Jabari Parker more minutes.
That's always the answer for me, man. But yeah, I actually see that team dissolving pretty quickly if they don't see some solid success.
Chris Middleton's a free agent next year, so someone's going to pay him some big bucks.
Yeah. And we've been hearing the Jabari rumors for a couple seasons.
Yeah.
They're clearly not maximizing his potential.
Exactly. I just think they don't realize how good he is, and they're so, which they should be infatuated with Giannis, but it's like you still need a second guy.
Yeah.
And as good as Chris Middleton is, I just feel like the way his game is, he's not assertive. He's kind of like a Klay Thompson, where yes, he can get you baskets and do things, but he's not necessarily a primary scorer or primary guy for your team. So, it's Milwaukee.
Hey, those are the questions that, as a fan, you can't really determine why, for our clear answer, what we would want to see why that's not happening. But hey, Giannis got his 2K cover, so that's all they need to focus on, man.
Definitely. Was there anything you noticed during the season aside from the obvious?
I definitely did see, and it did happen. Houston challenging Golden State for a conference title. They unfortunately fell down to injuries again, and Chris Paul just, I don't know what he's done he's kicked some the basketball gods in the balls enough times.
You mean Julius Hodge?
But yeah, I thought this was, if any opportunity to take down the Warriors, and this would have been the season to do it for Houston. Going into next season, and we'll talk about that shortly. That's off the table. I'm sorry.
Aside from the Chris Paul injury, do you think there was anything they could have done differently to beat the Warriors?
No, I actually think they played outside of game one, if I recall correctly, they seem to be playing out of pace. You know, a lot of teams just do that with Golden State. They try to keep up with the,
And you can't.
the energy of the game. It just will slip away from you. But at some point, they did begin to focus back on defense. We saw some big minutes from guys like PJ Tucker and some other key role players. Even Gerald Green was giving them some quality buckets.
All 9 fingers.
But realistically, I think it went how we expected again. A solid series, but ultimately I think Golden State still would have found some way to pull it out.
I agree. I feel like Capella could have got some more minutes.
Absolutely.
Because you do go small ball against the Warriors, but then at the same time, if you do have a guy that's a physical presence, you got to play him because that's your advantage.
Absolutely.
And then one thing we always talk about, I feel like NBA teams don't use their bench enough. I feel like Joe Johnson should have got a little bit, maybe 5 minutes.
That was like game 6 that he finally
they're
got
like,
some
hey,
run.
sub you in, and by the way, guard Steph Curry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I've always been pretty much thrown by how teams just consolidate their rotation in the playoffs. I mean, to me, the playoffs is about that bench success, really. It's about longevity, and you don't maintain that, you know, in my mind, just with a 7-guy rotation.
Which is one of the reasons why the Warriors are so good, and even to the Eastern Conference, why Boston was so good, because they had such a deep rotation. And I feel like during the regular season, that's the time where you need to get these guys to see, okay, can I rely on a guy like Terry Rozier to give me 5 to 12 minutes, you know, in a big-time playoff game, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to sit him on the bench the whole year. Then Kyrie gets hurt and we got to throw him into. Like, I think that's a big thing about coaching, and you just don't get that with the majority of guys in the league outside of Brad Stevens.
Right. There's clearly development coaches in the league, and there's clearly coaches that just want to get exactly. They just want to run their superstars into a machine, basically, make them machines, and that ultimately does not work. But it's interesting, you know. We've talked about, you know, compared the regular season, the way that teams kind of structure themselves, like the Lakers and the Spurs for several seasons.
Right.
They really, they were focused on exposing every player on the floor's ability.
Right. See what they have, see what they don't. And they weren't a playoff team until this year, but you had the same thing with the Sixers and the trust the process. Yes, you're tanking in a sense, but you're also getting to see, okay, I've got guys like TJ McConnell and Robert Covington who were on, you know, minimum contracts, but they're playing big minutes and they can contribute, but you don't get that unless they actually step on the court.
Dude, I'm a firm believer of experience is the greatest teacher. You will learn every lesson you need to learn on the floor. Now, whether or not your team is willing to deal with perhaps some of those hiccups and some of those areas to develop is a different conversation, but I think you hit the nail on the head with teams like Philly and Boston. Just throwing those guys out there, telling them they really don't have much to lose, play your game, and just try to win for each other, and that usually works.
Definitely. Quick question. Who's the backup point guard for the Rockets?
It's a great question.
I think that
is that necessary?
I think that pretty much answers itself. If they had, I mean, I don't even know who you would throw in there, but the fact that they didn't really have someone
I think
to come in
the majority of the time they were running Eric Gordon maybe off the bench.
Eric Gordon, pretty much it was just a rotation of either Harden or Paul. Had you had another guy like, I'm going way back for this, but like Eric Maynor, like if you had a guy back there, even Ish Smith, you know, if you had a guy like that, you probably would have been better suited, you know, for this to happen. Which now that I'm thinking about it, as a GM, you should have prepared for this, because we all know Chris Paul is injury prone. You know, you don't want to, you don't want to say that's going to happen, but these are the kind of things you have to prepare for.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, you would prepare for that with if your 7-footer had been historically injury prone every
Right.
season. You probably go to the draft. You'd go straight for a couple backups.
Right. Instead, you have guys like R.J. Hunter on the bench playing.
Right. Well,
What do we
Houston,
know?
I think they're similar to Cleveland in that they just rely on their key guys to handle the
Right.
ball so often. They certainly will probably look to cover that gap for next year.
Yeah. Shout out to Kyle Davis playing G League for the
Oh, is that
Rio
his
Valley
name?
Rappers? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Kyle Davis has come play with us at LA Fitness, so Houston, go ahead and give the guy a call.
Hey, he plays a strong game,
Right.
so
Let him get some buckets.
right, give you some dirty minutes.
So aside from that, any quick things about the
Maybe the
finals?
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, right. Oh, it was just a shit show. And we won't.
Let's not talk about that.
Yeah, let's not go
let's
into
just
that.
run over this real quick. So, obviously, the Western Conference Finals was the probably most competitive series
Yeah.
of the playoffs. How do you feel about the reseeding of the playoffs of best records 1 through 16 as
Right.
opposed to conferences?
While I don't know the particulars of how that would work over the long term, because I think we obviously we have a tendency to see the same franchises represented. I do think it is a necessary conversation given what's happening in today's league.
Yeah.
The shift has just become too dynamic, and I'm wondering if something like a restructure like that would cause even more of a shift. While you might not still have a conference line, you'd still see all the top teams from the West in the top seeding.
From a marketing standpoint, I feel like it's too late to just say, okay, we're going to take the top 16. Now, I get it from competitive, like I said, marketing, and at the end of the day, basketball, NBA, it's a business.
Yeah.
It's there to make money. If you have a team like just, Houston and Golden State playing the finals, that means it's going to be late, TV times for each one, and you're pretty much neglecting a market.
Yeah.
Now, what I think they could do is you'd have to realign the conferences. And so kind of how the NFL is. You don't have the East and the West. It's American and National. And
Right.
while they're still regional, you still have teams that are like, why are they in this conference or that division? So I think if they were to restructure the conferences to take it away from East and West, I think it'd be more of a possibility. But the way it is now, I think Eastern Conference owners aren't going to go for teams
Yeah.
like Miami,
Yeah.
Washington, the AC's kind
Right.
of teams. They're not going to go for that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what Silver would present to, persuade teams to fall in line with that plan. Right now, I think people have opened up the conversation about some of these subpar teams, even, perhaps taking away, a good bit of regular season games, or even removing a couple franchises. People are certainly looking, I believe, for a postseason change, and even perhaps a regular season change, because this is just there's some trends that are happening right now that I don't see slowing down, and it's going to cause us, for example, we live in the Eastern Conference, so we're just suffering
Very
as
rough.
fans. So I'm interested to see what Silver proposes. I don't know if that'll happen anytime soon.
Yeah, I doubt it. I think he's more concerned with legalizing gambling and putting advertisements on jerseys. But
Multiple streams of income, man.
Yeah,
Hey, it's a business.
basketball related income. Definitely, I think there's a lot of interesting things to come. That's going to be our season recap. When we come back, we'll touch on the draft.
A lovely NBA draft.
Yes.